How did the transport policy in the EU come about, and what are the challenges we face today? These and other questions will be answered by the series Looking Back, Looking Ahead on the occasion of the informal video conference of EU transport ministers last October 29th, when the foundation for today's European Union were laid with the signing of the contract for the establishment of the European Economic Community, the EEC, on March 25th in 1957, in the capital of Rome. Transport policy was already part of the agreements of that time. In addition to the abolition of customs duties and the introduction of a common commercial policy towards third countries, Article 3 stipulates the removal of obstacles to the free movement of people, services and capital between member states, and explicitly the introduction of a common policy in the field of transport. Today, the common transport policy is a central pillar of the common market in the European Union. It is decisive for the realization of the free movement of persons, the freedom to provide services and the free movement of goods. With around 9% of the European gross value added in 2016, the transport sector also makes a significant contribution to the economic prosperity of the Union. In 2016 alone, economic output in this area totaled around 664 billion euros, generated by around 11 million employees. But even though the transport sector is explicitly mentioned in the Treaty of Rome, it would take almost 3 decades for the agreements made in 1957 to be translated into concrete policy measures. The reason for this was a long-standing fundamental dispute about the question of whether common policy areas in the EC should first be liberalized, that means opened for other market participants in the common market, or first harmonized, that means harmonized in terms of regulatory requirements. Germany and other member states have always advocated regulatory harmonization first in order to facilitate the subsequent liberalization. The increasing political pressure to complete the internal market and, last but not least, an action by the European Parliament before the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, finally gave the impetus for the development of an active transport policy in the then European Communities, the EC. The judgment passed by the ECJ in May 1985 obliged the Council of the EC to establish the freedom to provide services already implemented in other areas in the transport sector. In 1985, decisive groundwork was set. In June, the heads of state and government presented their white paper on completing the internal market in Milan, which also provided for a free market in the area of goods transport until 1992. In November, the Council of Transport Ministers of the EC followed suit. From 1992 onwards, not only were the previously existing volume restriction in cross-border traffic to be abolished, further distortions of competition, such as tolls and vehicle taxes, also had to be compensated. With the founding of the European Union through the signing of the Maastricht Treaty in February 1992, not only did the agreed market opening and the creation of an EU-wide internal transport market come about, but for the first time also questions of traffic safety, economic and social cohesion, and not least also of environmental protection. Since then, it has also been the declared goal of the EU to continuously integrate the transport infrastructure of the member states under the term Trans-European Networks, the TEN. Since the 1990s, and especially since the eastward expansion in 2004, freight traffic in the EU has increased rapidly, while the shares of other modes of transport, such as rail or inland waterways, have stagnated. Against this background, the concept of sustainable and intermodal, that means combined mobility, became more and more important. The most important lever was to shift freight traffic from road to rail, sea and inland waterways, and to increase the mutual connectivity between the individual modes of transports and systems. The aim is to achieve a more balanced proportion of the individual modes of transport and to guarantee and improve safety and sustainability. While the common transport policy in Europe was initially more of a regulatory sub-area of the common market, the increase in transport in the EU and, more recently, the more urgent debate about climate change meant that the regulatory dimension took a backseat in favor of concrete transport policy. Examples include the European satellite navigation system Galileo, which combines the intelligent control of traffic flows with digital sovereignty, or the European Rail Traffic Management System, the ERTMS, with which national rail networks are to be more closely interlinked. But private transport also needs innovative solutions. For example, citizens in Germany spend an average of 41 hours a year looking for a parking space. A smart parking solution that shows free parking spaces on a corresponding platform has potential savings of around 1 million tons of CO2 annually. The goals of the EU are clear. According to the current white paper on transport by the EU Commission, road freight transport is to be shifted by 30% by 2030 and by more than 50% to other modes of transports such as rail or ship traffic by 2050. In the area of urban and individual mobility, the proportion of vehicles powered by conventional fuel in city centers is to be halved by 2030 and even absolutely minimized by 2050. Basically, the EU is striving for a more comprehensive application of the principle of cost bearing by users and polluters and greater commitment by the private sector to eliminate distortion. The COVID-19 pandemic has impressively demonstrated to us how important functioning transport networks and effectively organized mobility are for citizens, for the economy, and for maintaining prosperity. The corona crisis also shows how important smoothly functioning transport systems are, especially in the event of a crisis. During the German EU Council presidency, key points for a pandemic emergency plan were therefore drawn up in order to secure supply chains and thus the supply of food and medication in the event of a crisis. But one thing is clear: the challenges facing the European transport sector make a comprehensive transport turnaround necessary. For example, the goal of a complete decarbonization of transport can only be achieved with emission-neutral mobility. In addition to setting the political course, innovations are of crucial importance. The new mobility approach of the German EU Council presidency understands climate protection and innovation as a unit that thinks transport and logistics as European from the start. In addition to the development of new non-fossil synthetic fuels or the expansion of charging infrastructure for e-mobility, this particularly applies to digital technologies. The Connecting Europe Facility financing ordinance, for example, creates the prerequisites for implementing so-called TEN streamlining. That means the expansion of EU-wide multimodal corridors for fast connections. The core networks should be in place by 2030. The vision is to be able to travel from Helsinki via Copenhagen and Munich to Malta with one ticket and as few changes as possible. This is made possible largely through intelligent networking of the individual models of transports, which are not only more efficient but also more environmentally friendly. If it is possible to combine climate protection and innovation in European transport policy, this is an opportunity to deepen European unification and secure a good position for the European Union in global competition. Many of the EU's achievements and regulations can only be understood by looking at their long history. That is why the German government take the informal councils and other events during the German EU Council presidency as an opportunity to take a look back at the emergence of different policy areas in the European Union. At the same time, they ask, how can the EU develop further in this area? And if you now want to know more about European or global politics, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you on the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!